6 years. 6 years I set a place for that family at every holiday table. And they stood up in my own dining room and told me I wasn't family anymore. My husband didn't say a word. His mother smiled like she'd been waiting years for that moment. Everyone laughed. Everyone clapped. Nobody in that room thought to ask one simple question: whose name was actually on the deed to the house they were all sitting in. But what that family didn't know was about to cost them everything they thought they owned. They thought they'd thrown me out for good. They had no idea I still held the one thing standing between them and the street. Before I show you exactly how that Thanksgiving humiliation came back around, comment where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you believe the people who count you out are always the last ones to see it coming. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 34 years old, an interior designer, and for 11 years I was married to a man named Todd Whitmore. I say was because after that Thanksgiving, something in me closed a door that never opened again. When Todd and I got married, his family made it very clear, in ways both loud and quiet, that I wasn't quite what they'd pictured for him. I didn't come from money. My father drove a delivery truck for 30 years, and my mother cleaned houses on the weekends to help pay for my design degree. The Whitmores, on the other hand, had old money. Not flashy money, the kind that whispers instead of shouts. Todd's mother, Patricia, ran the family like a small, elegant kingdom, and I was never given a crown. Still, I tried. God, I tried. For 11 years, I hosted Christmas Eve dinners, remembered every niece's allergy, drove 2 hours each way to sit through Patricia's garden club luncheons because family shows up. I told myself that love meant patience, that eventually they'd see me the way Todd claimed to. Here's the detail that matters, the one none of them ever bothered to ask about. 6 years ago, when Todd's father passed away suddenly, the family house, the one everyone gathered in every single holiday, the one with the wraparound porch and the garden Patricia was so proud of, was buried in debt. Todd never told his mother the full truth. He came to me instead, quietly, at 2 a.m, terrified. I was the one with the savings. I was the one with the credit history clean enough to qualify. So I paid it off. All of it. And the title, the actual legal deed to that house, went into my name. Not Todd's. Not Patricia's. Mine. Todd begged me not to tell his mother it was me. He said she'd never accept charity from someone she didn't consider real family. So I stayed quiet. I let her believe some insurance policy had covered it. I let her keep her pride. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit, as long as the people I loved had a roof over their heads. That was 6 years ago, and I want you to remember that number, because it's about to matter a lot. This year, Thanksgiving fell on a Thursday like it always does. And like every year before it, I spent 3 days cooking. I brined the turkey myself. I made Patricia's mother's stuffing recipe from scratch, because she once mentioned, offhand, that store-bought stuffing was for people who didn't care enough to try. I cared. I always cared, even when it was never once returned. The table was full that night. Todd's sister Danielle was there with her husband. Patricia sat at the head like always, in the chair that used to be her husband's. Todd sat beside her instead of beside me, which should have told me something, but I'd learned not to notice things like that anymore. It was over dessert when it happened. Patricia tapped her wine glass with a spoon, the way she always did before an announcement, and I actually smiled, thinking she was going to toast the meal. Instead, she stood up, looked directly at me, and said the words I will never forget as long as I live. I think it's time we're honest with each other. Claire, you've been a guest in this family for a long time, but you were never really part of it. And frankly, after everything, I don't think you should keep pretending. You're not family. You never were. The table went quiet, and then it didn't. Danielle actually laughed, this short, sharp sound like she'd been waiting for permission. Todd, my husband, the man I had bailed out of his own family's financial ruin without asking for a single thing in return, sat there and said absolutely nothing. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He just stared at his plate like it had suddenly become the most interesting thing in the room. I felt my whole body go cold and hot at the same time. 11 years of showing up, of trying, of biting my tongue, collapsed into one single sentence in front of everyone I'd once considered my family. But here's what none of them knew. Sitting there so pleased with themselves, so certain they'd finally said the thing they'd wanted to say for over a decade. They were sitting in a house that legally belonged to me. Every wall, Every floorboard, every inch of that dining room where they just humiliated me, it was mine. And they were about to find out exactly what that meant. I didn't say a word back to Patricia that night. I didn't cry either, though everyone at that table was probably waiting for it. I just set my napkin down, thanked her for a lovely evening in a voice so calm it startled even me, and drove home alone because Todd stayed behind to smooth things over with his mother. Smooth things over, as if I were the mess that needed cleaning up. I want to be honest with you about something. Sitting in that car in the driveway, I didn't feel broken. Not right away. What I felt, underneath the shock, was something closer to clarity. 11 years of convincing myself that patience was love, that silence was grace. And in one sentence, Patricia had done me the strange favor of finally telling me the truth. I gave it exactly 1 week. I needed that week to be sure I wasn't acting out of anger. Because anger fades and decisions made in anger have a way of costing you later. I spent that week doing something Todd didn't know about. I met with a real estate attorney I'd worked with years ago on a client's property line dispute, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Priya. I brought her the original deed transfer paperwork from 6 years ago, the loan payoff records, everything with my name on it in black and white. She confirmed what I already knew. The house was mine, fully, legally, without question. Todd's name had never been on it. Patricia's certainly hadn't. Then I asked her one question. If I simply asked the current occupants to vacate, how long would that legally take? And what were my options? Here's where the story gets interesting, because I didn't want revenge that looked like revenge. I didn't want to scream or humiliate Patricia the way she'd humiliated me. I wanted something colder, something that would make her understand, in her own language of pride and property and appearances, exactly what she'd thrown away. Todd came home 4 days after Thanksgiving, acting like nothing had happened. He mentioned, almost casually, that his mother wanted to let things cool down before the next family gathering. I asked him one simple question. Did he agree with what she said? Did he think I wasn't family? He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. He said something about how his mother didn't mean it the way it sounded, and how I know how she gets. 11 years, and that was the best defense my husband could offer me. I didn't argue. I didn't cry in front of him either. I simply told him I needed some time to think, and I meant it in a way he didn't understand yet. 3 weeks later, Priya helped me draft and send a formal, legally notarized letter to the property's occupants. Not an angry letter. Not a cruel one. Just facts. As the sole legal owner of the property located at that address, I was providing formal notice that I intended to explore my full ownership options moving forward, and I would need to discuss the future occupancy of the home with all current residents. I heard about the reaction secondhand, through Danielle, who called me in an absolute panic, her voice climbing higher with every sentence. She wanted to know if this was some kind of joke. I told her, very calmly, that I don't send legal notices as jokes. Patricia called next. She didn't apologize. Not directly. She talked in circles about family and misunderstandings and how she'd always cared about me deep down. I let her finish. Then I asked her a question I'd been holding on to for 6 years. I asked if she remembered how the house had been saved from foreclosure after her husband passed. She went quiet. I told her the truth then, plainly, without drama. It wasn't an insurance policy. It was me, my savings, my credit, my name on the deed. Because her son had been too afraid to tell her the truth, and I had been foolish enough to protect his pride instead of my own. The silence on the other end of that call lasted almost 30 seconds. I didn't take the house from them. I want to be clear about that, because I'm not the villain in this story despite what Patricia probably tells people now. I gave them 6 months, formally, in writing, to make new arrangements, find new housing, adjust their finances. What I did take away was the illusion. The illusion that I was disposable. That 11 years of loyalty could be erased with one cruel sentence at a dinner table I had personally set. Todd and I are divorced now. That part surprised people less than you'd think. Some things, once said out loud, can't be unsaid. And some silences, once witnessed, can't be unfelt. He tried, toward the end, to convince me to reconsider the house, to think of his mother's health, her age, her pride. I told him I understood completely how important pride was. I'd learned that lesson directly from Patricia herself. The last time I saw her was at the closing meeting with our attorneys, arranging the transition of the property to new tenants. She didn't look at me the way she had at that Thanksgiving table. She looked smaller somehow, in a room full of paperwork with her name notably absent from every document that mattered. I still think about that dinner sometimes, the way she stood up so confidently, so sure of her own power in that house. She was right about one thing, in the end. I was never really part of that family. I was just the one holding it together the whole time.